Exposed, spine-chilling Whistler's Unearth Sinister tales from the haunted depths of the internet in the quiet suburb of Maplewood, Ohio, where the streetlights flicker like dying stars over the asphalt. Sarah's heart raced daily with the burden of being a single mother. At night, as shadows loomed larger than life, the whispers of the woods behind her backyard were impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the rustling leaves. There was something lurking just out of sight, something sinister that dripped with promises of fear. One evening, after tucking in her bright-eyed son Leo, she lay in bed, listening for the familiar sound of his soft breathing. Just as sleep threatened to take her, a haunting whistle pierced the silence. A chill ran through the air. It was faint at first, almost melodic, but then it escalated, weaving a sinister tune that unraveled the calm of her home. Sarah's heart pounded as the melody echoed through the stillness, threading its way deeper into her gut. Was it the wind? A critter? The shadows danced, taunting her with what-ifs. Scrolling through social media during her downtime at work, she stumbled across terrifying tales of Whistler's haunting families, taking what they cherished most. As she read about the shadowy figures stalking unsuspecting neighborhoods, a knot twisted in her stomach. Pets had gone missing in Maplewood, but no one seemed to care. Dark thoughts filled her mind, turning her everyday life into a hollow husk of dread, haunted by the fear of the unknown. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the whistling intensified, Sarah's resolve hardened. The once friendly elderly neighbor who waved at her now sent shivers down her spine. His familiar face twisted into something unknown, something like malice that lay beneath the surface. What had once been a pint-sized suburban paradise transformed into a labyrinth of fear, where every friendly gesture felt like an incognito threat. Desperation clawed at her composure. She sought help, only to find the local police brushing off her frantic worries. Just a noise, they said, shrugging her off like dirt off their shoulders. But she wasn't imagining it. The whispers ebbed and flowed like the tide, filling her nights with shadows and questions that seeped into her reality. Every creak of the house, every rustle outside felt tainted, marked by the darkness that was slowly closing in. The whistling crescendoed, washing over her in a terrifying symphony as she peered through the window, half expecting to see the ghostly figure that her mind conjured. In that moment, it became impossible to find solace. The cries of once happy families echoed in her mind, twisted tales from the depths of folklore surfacing with every click. A single message illuminated her phone, a notification of a family gone missing long ago, the very image hauntingly familiar. Time stood still as she stood frozen at the edge of this reality. Who, or what, was waiting in the dark with a whistle promising chaos? Shadows flitted through the trees outside as she prepared to confront the terror that had seeped into her life, and just as her heartbeat thundered in her ears, the whistling climbed to a spine-chilling climax, leaving her breathless and stripped of any false hope. The forest loomed like a gaping mouth in the night, ready to swallow everything whole, and Sarah was left trembling at the threshold. What awaited her beyond the veil of night? Sarah's breath quickened as she stood there, frozen, every nerve ending screaming for escape. The whistling twisted, stretching into a mocking laugh that seemed to echo from the darkened woods. It reverberated off the walls in her home, pulling her deeper into its eerie grip. Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to show fear to the very thing that thrived on it. With trembling fingers, she grabbed her phone and dialed the number of a friend. The screen lit up, illuminating her pale face in the dark. As the phone rang, her heart raced, pounding like a drum in a frenzied march. Just as she prepared to leave a desperate message, a gravelly voice interrupted her thoughts. "Sarah?" It was Mark, a childhood friend. His voice, shaky and low, washed over her like a wave of calm amidst the storm. "What's going on? You sound Mark, I need you to come over." "Right now," she pleaded, unable to hide the urgency in her tone. "Okay, I'll be there soon," he assured, but his voice trailed off, thick with apprehension. Hanging up, Sarah turned her focus back to the darkened window where the shadows seemed to ride like restless spirits. The whistling had quieted, returning to that haunting melody that mangled her thoughts. She forced herself to breathe slowly, inching back to the window, peering into the looming darkness. Then she saw a figure, just out of reach. It stood beneath the largest tree in her yard, cloaked in darkness. It was too still, too silent. Sarah squinted, trying to make out any feature in the inky blackness, but the more she stared, the more it seemed to dissolve into the night. She shivered, backing away from the window. The knowledge that something was out there, something watching her, gnawed at her sanity. Was it even real? Was she losing her mind, succumbing to the very tale she'd read about? A chill crept down her spine as the whistling struck up again, this time sharper, more insistent. Her phone buzzed, breaking the terrifying spell. It was a message from Leo's school, yet another alert about a missing child just a few blocks away. Panic clawed at her throat like a wild animal trapped in a cage. More missing kids? She whispered to herself in disbelief. How many families had already been shattered? The weight of dread settled heavy in her chest, making it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a loud knock jolted her from her thoughts. Mark! She rushed to the door, her heart racing with renewed hope. But as she flung it open, no one stood there. The porch was empty, the night swallowed every sound. Mark? She called, her voice cracking. Silence. Just as she turned back, the whistling crescendoed again, echoing right behind her, a sinister whisper that coiled around her thoughts. She spun around, scanning her darkened home, fear coursing through her veins like icy water. Then she heard its soft footsteps padding across the floor above. Leo? But he was in his room, tucked away. No, the sound was low and deliberate, an intruder weaving through familiar halls, heart pounding. Sarah grabbed a heavy flashlight from the side table and crept toward the stairs. Each creak of the wood felt like an alarm bell ringing, warning her of the dangers ahead. As she reached the stairs, another knock echoed through the house. Hello? Sarah? It was Mark, this time frantic. Upstairs. Something is up there. She shouted back, barely containing her fear-laced words. Mark's footsteps rushed up the stairs, sending a flood of adrenaline through her body. But as he neared the top, the whistling swelled, mingling with the whisper of her own panic. Sarah struggled to catch her breath, forcing her legs forward, but before she could reach the staircase, the intruder came into view. A tall shadow loomed at the top of the stairs, its outline vaguely human but distorted. It turned to face her. The whistling echoed, an awful melody that dripped with malice, drowning out the flickering sound of her heartbeat. Why did you come home, Sarah? The voice was otherworldly, sinister, and sweet, sending shivers coursing through her. But before she could scream, Mark burst through the front door, eyes wide as saucers, and behind him, the woods shimmered with a darkness that felt alive. Run! He yelled, but did she have time to escape? Did they have a chance against the whispers hiding in the dark? The shadow leaned forward, its gaze locking onto Sarah with cold hunger. What had it truly come for? As the whistling intensified, wrapping around them like a noose, she realized something chilling. She wasn't the only one being hunted that night. What price would they pay to uncover the true meaning of the melody in the darkness? As Sarah's heart thundered, the shadow's presence felt like a suffocating fog creeping toward her. She turned to Mark, their eyes meeting in a frantic exchange. Get Leo, she shouted, urgency propelling her words. Mark hesitated, looking between her and the menacing figure upstairs. Then, with determination set in his jaw, he bolted up the stairs. The whistling grew louder, a tortured symphony drawing them in, each note ringing a fresh wave of fear from her soul. Sarah felt her entire being scream for escape, but her feet were rooted in place. She blinked hard, trying to dispel the darkness surrounding her, trying to grasp at any thread of hope. Suddenly, the whistling stopped. A deafening silence descended upon them, pressing against her ears like a warning bell. And then it came again, this time from outside the house. Sarah, it wasn't just a whistle, it was a voice, slinking through the cracks, lacing through the air like smoke. Come play with us, Mark. She screamed, her voice laced with desperation. I'm right here. He called back, pounding down the hall toward Leo's room. She could hear the soft thuds of his footsteps mixed with her own fast-racing heartbeat. The figure shifted, leaning forward, drawn to the sound. Its shape became more defined, more sinister. With each passing second, it felt as if the room collapsed around her, a dark gravity pulling her in. She shivered, the air heavy and thick. "Sarah, come join us." "You can't hide forever." The voice from outside coiled around the word forever, dripping with false promises and untold horrors. Mark suddenly appeared at the top of the stairs, Leo tucked safely under his arm. The boyish wide eyes scanned the home's oppressive atmosphere, sensing the danger, the heaviness that loomed. "What's happening?" he asked, fear evident in his quivering voice. "I don't know," Sarah replied, panic coursing through her veins. "But we need to leave now." Before she could take another step towards them, the shadow unleashed a guttural rasp, a torrent of laughter echoing off the walls. "You're all mine now." "The game has just begun," sweet Sarah. A rush of icy dread blinded her. This was no ordinary intruder. The whispers had morphed into a living entity, a terror born from the darkest corners. "Run!" Mark yelled again, his voice breaking. He pushed Leo down the stairs, a fierce protectiveness igniting in him. Sarah followed, her limbs heavy with fear, her body moving on instinct alone. They burst through the front door into the cool night air, but horror awaited them outside. Figures stood beneath the trees, silhouettes against the swirling darkness, faces lost to shadow. The whistling crested again, this time rising into a chaotic harmony that suffocated any shred of comfort. "Help us!" cried an echoing voice, distorted and taunting. It grew louder, chilling her to the bone as she recognized it, the call of missing children. The woods seemed to ripple with their voices, a haunting chorus pulling her back, beckoning her to come closer. "Sarah, stay with us!" Mark shouted, shaking her shoulder. The world around her warped between the terror of the figures and the shadows and the reality before her. "I can't," she started, but the whistling rose again, invading her thoughts, weakening her resolve. She felt rooted in place, the grotesque faces drawing closer, whispering secrets of darkness that made her skin crawl. "We need to go." Mark's grip tightened, but amidst the swirling cacophony of fear, Sarah realized they weren't just being hunted, they were entangled in something far larger, something that had been waiting for them. A sudden roar burst forth from the woods, the shadows writhing closer with a dissonant melody echoing through the trees. "Are you ready to play?" The voice twisted with malice, a dreadful promise that sent ice racing through her heart. What horrors lay ahead as the shadows surrounded them, whispering the dark secrets of their melody? The night was far from over. The figures shifted, pooling around them like a dark mist. Sarah could feel their eyes, many eyes watching, judging. Panic coursed through her veins as she tried to pull herself back from the brink, but the whistling twisted around her thoughts, wrapping her in its spectral embrace. "Run!" Mark yelled again, urgency racing through his voice like a wild animal. He tugged Leo closer, urgency reigniting her instincts. But where? The yard stretched out before them, shadows writhing in the moonlight, each tree a silent sentinel waiting to hold them in its grasp. A distant crash echoed, branches snapping like brittle bones. "Over there!" Mark pointed toward the edge of the yard, where the trees thinned. He squeezed Leo's hand, their only ally now was each other, and fear was clawing at their heels. As they took off, Sarah felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, echoing the nameless dread that surged through her. The whistling crescendoed, each note sharp and taunting, soaring above the chaotic whispers. "Let us go!" she gasped, though her legs felt heavy, filled with lead. The figures in the shadows began to coalesce, revealing twisted, distorted faces that contorted into grim expressions, half smiles mingled with deep-set eyes filled with sorrow and rage. Leo stumbled, his small body weighed down by the night's terror. "Mommy, I'm scared!" he cried, and in that instant, guilt surged through Sarah, spiraling tighter around her heart. "Keep moving!" Mark shouted, his voice a lifeline pulling her back to reality. But she felt a pull, a visceral tug at her insides. What had happened to all those children? Were they caught here, doomed to roam in these shadows forever? "Sarah!" Mark's voice cracked with desperation, snapping her focus back. A frigid gust swept through the yard, snatching the breath from her lungs. "We need to hide." A knot of fear twisted in her stomach. Hide? Was that really all they could do? Without answering, Sarah dashed towards a cluster of bushes, the sharp edges digging into her arms as she forced her way inside. Mark followed with Leo tucked close to him, their breaths harsh and loud, punctuating the suffocating silence. Inside the thicket, they crouched, drenched in darkness, trying desperately to silence their breathing, as the cacophony of whispers enveloped them. The figures loomed closer, swaying and slinking through the open yard, their forms indistinguishable in the dim light. "Come out, come play," the haunting voices echoed, mocking. Sarah pressed her hands over Leo's ears, squeezing her eyes shut. She wanted to tell herself it wasn't real, that it couldn't be, but the resonance of that voice dripped with pain, a pain that now was woven into their very skin. Just then, she felt something, a chilling presence moving beside her. A whisper of dread slithered through her mind. "Help us, we need you," not again, Sarah muttered, lifting her head at the soft plea tucked into the rustling leaves. The shadows thickened, surrounding their thicket like a living entity. She peered through the branches, seeing the figures searching, their faces twisting into earnest masks of despair and agitation. The blend of their whispers darkened the atmosphere, growing into an unbearable scream. "Sarah," Mark hissed, glaring at her, eyes wild. "Don't listen." But she couldn't help it. The words pulled her, luring her closer to the edge of sanity. She knew she shouldn't listen. Yet, the urge was intoxicating. The childlike voices repeated, rising into a fever pitch, dripping sweet despair. A crack like thunder burst through the silence. The ground shuddered beneath them, and the shadows scattered momentarily as something emerged from the depths of the woods, a dark silhouette breaking through what had come to claim them. Was it the game they didn't want to play, or something worse? Fear twisted Sarah's stomach as she braced for the new terror lurking just out of sight, knowing that whatever it was, they were far from safe. The darkness burst forth, unwinding like smoke, revealing a grotesque figure towering among the trees. Its limbs were long and spindly, each movement fluid yet jerky, as if it were an extension of the shadows themselves. Mark held Leo tight against him, his heart racing like a trapped animal. What is that?" Leo whimpered, his small voice trembling. "I don't know," Mark replied, eyes wide, "but we need to stay quiet." The figure paused, head tilting in their direction. Even from a distance, they could see its eyes, shimmering orbs of void swirling with an eerie light. Shadowy whispers filled the air, intertwining with the faint whistling that seemed to emanate from the thing itself. "Please," the whispers grew louder, trapped between desperation and malice. "Join us, we will play." Every word cut into Sarah's chest, a searing brand of dread. She glanced at Mark, who motioned her to keep silent. She felt Leo's breaths quickening against her arm, and the fear was a palpable weight over her heart. The figure inched closer, gliding effortlessly over the grass, its long fingers stretching toward their hiding spot as if sensing their warmth. Time slowed, the world outside their thicket blurred into a haze as the air thickened with terror. The path they had taken towards safety felt like a distant memory. Then a sudden rustle broke the stillness, brave yet foolish. Another child stepped from the shadows, drawn by the figure's enchanting call. It was a frail girl, hair matted with dirt, her clothes torn, eyes clouded yet full of misplaced hope. "Play with us," she cried, reaching toward the grotesque creature with abandon. "No!" Mark shouted, instinctively lunging forward, but Sarah gripped his arm, her eyes pleading. There was nothing they could do now but hide, trapped in their own hell, as the girl fell into the creature's grasp. Sarah's stomach twisted as it enveloped her, a cascade of shadows swallowing her whole. The whispers swelled, enveloping the night in a frenzy. "Help us," the girl's voice echoed in a chilling circuit, blending with the mournful cries of countless others. Mark was shaking, his face contorted in a mask of horror. "We have to move. Now!" They crept out of the bushes, chilled by the sight of what had just happened. The yard was different, the figures shifted closer, their shapes morphing with each step they took. They were no longer shadows but tangible horrors, the memory of the girl sinking into the darkness igniting a fury in Sarah. "What are they?" Leo sobbed, clutching his mother's hand tightly as Sarah dragged him back. "Something terrible," Mark breathed, his spirit waning. "We can't let them take us too." They dashed past branches that whipped at them, tree trunks looming as grotesque figures, silently witnessing their plight. Yet the whispers seemed to echo from everywhere. "Come play, help us." As they neared the edge of the yard, a high-pitched laughter echoed through the trees. The shadows twisted, drawing nearer with twisted glee, and time felt fragile as the creature shifted its focus, a terrible hunger glimmering in its depths. Just ahead, the line of trees opened into a moonlit path, a sliver of safety, but something heavy loomed behind them. Mark paused, turning back towards the silhouettes, and Sarah felt it too. They were cornered, the blackened figures surged forward, their grotesque movements radiating malicious intent. "We won't let you go," a warped voice hissed, slithering like smoke into her thoughts. "Run, now!" Mark cried. Terrified, they raced forward, slipping past the threshold of trees. But just as they did, a furious scream erupted from behind. "Help us!" The chorus echoed as the figure lunged in their direction, an overwhelming darkness rushing to claim them. In a heart-stopping rush, they burst onto the path, the night stretching before them like an abyss. Leo's grip faltered, and Sarah's heart raced with dread as she turned to look. "Mark, what do we do?" she screamed. But the shadows were pouring out of the woods, cold fingers wrapping around the edges of the light. They were being chased, the echoes of lost souls surrounding them. How could they escape the darkness if it was always chasing, always hungry? "Keep running!" Mark shouted, as the figures poured from the thicket, desperation echoing in their twisted smiles. What path could lead them to safety now? In that moment of terror, Sarah caught a glimpse of something ahead, a faded sign barely illuminated in the darkness, whispering a truth darker than their fear. Could they outrun what had already hunted them? What if escape was just a step toward a much worse fate? The path seemed endless, a gaping maw ready to swallow them whole. Each hurried step sent tremors through the earth, as if the ground itself was alive with dread. The night air prickled against Sarah's skin, electric with the scent of wet leaves and something far worse, an essence of despair, seeping from the shadows hunting them. "Look!" Leo shouted, breaking the panic for a split second. He pointed ahead, his little finger trembling in the dim light. A dilapidated old cabin loomed in the clearing, its windows dark and hollow like the eyes of a corpse. The walls were gnarled, dripping with ivy and secrets, as though the very structure itself were a creature of the night, waiting for intruders. Should we hide in there? Sarah's heart said yes. Another part of her screamed they would be trapped again, hands too close for comfort. Mark hesitated, glancing back at the figures spilling from the woods. Their forms twisted grotesquely, stretching unnaturally. They were almost on top of them, the air hummed with their anticipation. "It's risky," he muttered, but the breath of approaching shadows quickened his resolve. "We need to make a decision now." "Go!" Sarah shouted, pulling Leo along. The presence of the cabin felt like a torrent in her veins. It might offer them the slim chance of salvation or the blackest despair. Heart pounding, they darted toward it, the whispers now a chaotic chorus reaching fever pitch. "Join us, become one of us." As they reached the door, it creaked ominously, swinging inward with an agonizing slowness. Shadows danced in the corners, clinging to the edges where the light dared not tread. Inside, it was darker than anticipated, the smell of damp wood and decay filled their nostrils. "Shoo!" Mark urged fiercely, pressing them against the wall as he peered outside. The figures hesitated at the threshold of the trees, their ghastly forms flickering in the semi-darkness. They're waiting," he murmured, an unsettling calm washing over him. "They know we're in here." "Then hurry, shut the door." Sarah felt the rise of claustrophobia, the shadows beyond seeming to claw towards them even more intensely. Mark slammed the door shut, and the thudding sound echoed through the cabin. They leaned against it together, hearts pounding like drumbeats of impending doom. Silence enveloped them, thick and dangerous, yet it was almost welcoming compared to the chaos outside. "I can't breathe," Leo whimpered, burying his face into his mother's jacket. "Just hold on, buddy," Mark whispered, running a shaky hand through his hair, eyes darting through the pervasive darkness inside the cabin. "We'll find a way out. There has to be another exit." They searched the room, cobwebs draping from the ceiling like torn curtains in their frantic effort to find safety. A small window at the back caught Sarah's eye, filthy and cracked, but it is an escape, a slim one. "Over here," she hissed, pointing to the window. Mark nodded, leading them toward it. He held Leo close, the boy's breath hitching from anxiety. But as they reached the window, the dim light revealed something grotesque on the floor. Pictures scattered across the wooden planks, images of children frozen in time, smiling faces twisted into a haunting clarity, all of them eerily familiar. "They're just like us," Leo gasped, eyes wide. "What happened to them?" Mark stumbled back, the truth dawning on him as dread curled in his stomach. What if they didn't escape? Suddenly, a loud crashing sound erupted from the front of the cabin. The door buckled under the weight of the grotesque figures, splintering as they pounded against it. Shadows poured in like smoke, eager to claim what remained of the living warmth inside. "Run!" Mark shouted, grabbing Leo and pushing Sarah toward the window. But the darkness was relentless, cascading through every crevice, seeking them with insatiable desire. Sarah took a breath, preparing to escape through the small window, when she caught a chilling reflection in the glass's shadow that shouldn't be there. Turned, an innocent childless face morphing into grotesque mirth. Laughing at her. "Help us!" join us with the laughter rising to a crescendo. She heard another voice beneath it, soft yet pleading, separate from the chorus. "Mommy, help me." Terror clawed at her throat as realization hit. Could they be trapped forever? In that moment, Mark paused, frozen in place as shadows surrounded him, closing in what hope remained in a sea of despair. Would they find a way out before it was too late, or was the darkness claiming another family? Mark's instincts jolted him into action, his heart threatening to burst from his chest. He had always been the protector, the strong one, but standing there, paralyzed by sheer terror, he felt the weight of despair crush him. "Mark! Move!" Sarah screamed, urgency backed by the growing clamor of the grotesque figures clawing at the door. Leo clutched her tightly, fear-induced tears streaming down his cheeks, the weight of the world pressing down on his small frame. Snap! The door splintered just above their heads. "Go!" Mark yelled again, breaking free from his stupor. With a swift motion, he shoved Leo toward the window. The small frame felt impossibly tight, but desperation drove them forward. "Help me!" Leo cried, panic rising. Sarah reached for him, her hand grasping the back of his shirt as she pulled him close. "Don't look back," she urged. The shadows gathered like storm clouds, dark and threatening, casting a veil of dread over them. They were almost there. Mark pushed Sarah and Leo up against the narrow window. Just as they were about to slip through, a chilling howl echoed around them, a sound that made the hair on their necks stand on end. The figures from outside screeched in a twisted harmony, a cacophony of voices overlapping each other as if they were singing an insidious lullaby. Join us, join us!" Those words reverberated through the cabin, intertwining with the shrieks of the approaching entities. For a moment, Sarah faltered, the phrase wrapping around her mind as if trying to seduce her to turn back, to abandon her escape. "Sarah, don't listen!" Mark shouted, shaking her from her trance. "Get out!" With newfound resolve, Sarah squeezed Leo through the gap first, the boy wriggling in panic. She could feel his small body move, hear him gasp as he landed outside, terror-soaked and vulnerable. Then, it was Mark's turn. He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as the shadows began to fill the room, dark tendrils reaching out like claws. "Come on!" Sarah cried, urgency bleeding through her voice. Mark gritted his teeth and squeezed through just as the echoes of desperation grew louder. He barely landed on the ground when a fierce wind swept the cabin, slamming the window shut, sealing whatever darkness lay within. Breathless, they stumbled into the clearing, enveloped by night. The cacophony from the cabin faded, yet dread remained, gripping their hearts like icy fingers. "Now what?" Leo whimpered, eyes wide, scanning their surroundings. The trees loomed ominously, creating a maze of shadows. Behind them, the cabin loomed like a predator waiting for its prey to make a fatal mistake. "We need to keep moving," Mark said, his voice steady but his legs trembling with the remnants of fear. The familiar path they just ran from was swallowed by the shadows behind them. Ahead, the dense woods beckoned, dark and foreboding. Barely managing a moment of reprieve, they pressed forward. But every crackle of leaves, every rush of wind whispered hints of terror back at them, leaving them on edge. Soon, they came across a narrow trail, lined with strange markings that seemed to shimmer in the meager light. "What are those?" Sarah pointed, her voice a whisper. The symbols were indecipherable yet felt deeply unsettling, etched into the trees like a secret language eager to be revealed. I don't know, but we can't stop to decipher them right now, Mark insisted, glancing back toward the cabin, a dark silhouette against the moonlight, taunting them. Then, from the depths of the woods, they heard it again, a soft whistle, distinct and haunting. It was calling, begging them to stop, to listen. Can you hear it? Leo asked, his voice trembling, eyes darting between his parents. Don't listen, Leo. Just keep moving, Sarah replied, gripping her son's hand tightly. But the sound seemed to seep into their bones, a melody of despair that stirred memories they couldn't grasp. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, weaving into their minds. Nerves frayed, they couldn't shake the feeling they weren't alone, that eyes watched their every move. Sentinels of the shadows. Mark took a deep breath, noticing the atmosphere thicken with danger. Something's wrong, we have to be careful. Then, they stumbled upon an unlit fire pit, its ashes swirling in the gentle breeze. But it wasn't what lay around it that sent chills down their spines, it was the unmistakable sight of more crumpled pictures, faces staring back at them, pleading for help from the depths of despair. Not again, Sarah gasped, her heart racing. Those faces, the children, they looked just like Leo. Mommy! Leo cried, clutching her tighter, frightened charm. I want to go home. But before she could soothe him, someone or something emerged from behind the trees. Help us, join us, the whisper echoed, a voice familiar yet twisted. In the flickering shadows, forms began to take shape, eyes glinting like knives in the dark. Run! Mark yelled, but a new fear slithered into their veins. It wasn't just the woods that held them captive, they were about to find out just how deep the horror ran. Would they uncover the truth before it claimed them too, or had they already joined the ranks of the lost? The shadows darted around them as they bolted deeper into the woods, breathless and desperate. Each tree was a sentinel, each rustle a warning, a reminder of the threats lurking just beyond their vision. Mark tugged Sarah and Leo along, adrenaline fueling their flight. The whispers twisted, merging into an unsettling chorus that echoed in Mark's mind. Join us, help us, it was the same line, curling through the darkness like smoke, enchanting yet malevolent. Why do they keep saying that? Leo panted, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. What do they want? Focus, Leo. Mark snapped, frustration bleeding into his tone. Listen to your mom and keep moving. They stumbled over roots and rocks, the oppressive darkness consuming them. Even the moonlight couldn't penetrate the thick canopy above, dimming their sense of direction. Mark glanced this way and that, trying to catch a glimpse of a path or a way out, but the trees loomed larger, encasing them in their twisted embrace. Sarah's grip tightened on Leo as they rounded a bend, uncertainty making her pulse race. Mark, what if we never find our way out? She whispered, the words barely leaving her lips. Just keep moving. He urged, his breath hitching. Frustration at not knowing where they were clashed with the suffocating dread at what chased them. Suddenly, Leo's small voice pierced through their racing thoughts. Look! Over there! He pointed toward a faint glimmer in the darkness. Through the trees, a flickering light emerged, an odd contrast to the suffocating dark. Mark squinted, trying to make sense of it. We need to check it out. It could be a way out or it could be a trap. Sarah interrupted, panic washing over her face. Maybe, but we don't have a choice. Mark gripped Sarah's hand and moved toward the uncertainty, heart pounding as they approached. The glimmer turned into a steady glow, illuminating a clearing. As they stepped into the patch of light, their breaths caught. A circle of stones surrounded a fire that flickered and danced in the stillness. Fragments of cloth swayed eerily from branches above, hanging like lost souls, remnants of something dark that had once transpired here. Are we safe? Leo's voice wavered, clutching his mother tightly. No, Mark muttered, scanning the perimeter with keen eyes. The familiar chill crept back, washing over him like ice water. Somewhere, hiding in the trees, they were still being watched. Without warning, the whispers returned, sharper and more demanding. Join us, help us. The sound rippled through the air, coiling around their minds, urging them to surrender, to give in to the shadows that tugged at their sanity. Stay close. Mark ordered, desperation lining his tone. Sarah looked around frantically. We have to do something, we can't just stand here. Maybe if we light this fire, Mark said, moving toward the pile of dry wood. But as he reached for it, something flickered in the corner of his eye, a shadow darting behind the trees. Sarah's voice quivered, catching the movement. The shadows began to swell, swirling at the edge of the clearing. Figures with pleading eyes stepped out of the darkness, their hollow expressions a mirror of despair. "Join us," they intoned, a chorus echoing through the night. Mark's heart raced as he turned to his family. "We can't listen. Whatever they are, we have to fight this." Just then, a figure broke free from the throng, rushing towards them. It looked like a child, but the eyes were too empty, too familiar. "Help me!" The voice was a hollow wail, reminding Mark of Leo's own pleas. "Leo, don't. Back away!" he shouted, pushing Sarah and Leo behind him. The child's hands reached out, ghostly in the dim light, the hunger in its gaze sickening. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar as they encircled the tiny family. Mark steadied himself, forcing a breath into his terrified lungs, gripping the memory of their escape close to his heart. But could they truly escape what they had awakened? As the shadows threatened to converge, the edge of the woods began to shift, twisting like a living entity. Mark could feel the air change, the tension mounting like a coiled spring. Suddenly, he heard a soft rustling behind him. Was it safety or doom? "Run deeper into the woods," he shouted, but as he turned, another twisted figure appeared before them, blocking the path. The flickering fire crackled behind them, whispering promises of warmth and escape, but it was just another illusion in this nightmare. What would it take to break free? Mark's heart raced as the figures closed in. "Join us," and then, there came a louder crash. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw something else, something that seemed to shimmer with a different light, entirely a way out, or another trap waiting to ensnare them. He had to choose. Time was running out. "Trust me. Follow me." But would they follow into the unknown, or risk losing themselves entirely? Mark didn't wait for an answer. He bolted towards the shimmering light, dragging Sarah and Leo with him. The whispers grew maddeningly louder, reverberating in his skull as if the very woods were alive with their haunting demand. "Join us!" The voices turned into a chorus of agony, fueling the panic in his heart. "Where are we going?" Leo cried, stumbling over an exposed root. His small frame nearly tugged them to the ground. "Just follow me." Mark grunted through clenched teeth, glancing back over his shoulder. The figures loomed closer, their gaunt faces contorting in sheer despair. They burst through a thicket, crashing into an open space lit by a spectral glow. The air felt electric, a thousand eyes watching from the shadows. The light pulsed from a strange object nestled in the center, like an alien artifact waiting to be uncovered. "What is that?" Sarah breathed, eyes wide with fear and intrigue. Mark hesitated, feeling the pull of the glow. It was mesmerizing, pulling him closer, but he could almost taste the danger. "I don't know, but we can't stop. We need to keep moving." The ground beneath them felt wrong, squelching and shifting, as if it wanted to suck them in. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a storm. "Help us!" "Join us!" There was a flicker of movement, a ghostly figure emerging from the periphery. It was a woman, her expression a mask of sorrow. "Mark!" she called, the name tumbling from her lips like a broken promise. "Help me, please." He stumbled back, instinctively shielding Leo and Sarah, heart lurching. "Don't look at her. Keep moving." But Leo hesitated, torn between fear and compassion. "Mom, she needs help." "Don't!" Mark shouted, terror clawing at his throat. "We can't help her, that's not real." Before Leo could answer, the earth quaked beneath them. Mark felt it, a wave of darkness billowing like smoke, creeping toward them, devouring the light. "Run! We can't let it catch us!" Mark shouted, pulling his family back into the suffocating woods. The air thickened with the cries of those trapped in the shadows. Desperation clawed at his throat like barbed wire. Every branch, every whisper, felt uninviting. It was as if the forest itself conspired against them. Sarah's breath quickened, and Mark could hear the ragged sound of fear spilling from her lungs. "Mark, what if we don't escape? What if we're trapped here forever?" "Just hold on to Leo. I promise we'll get out, but that was a lie, and he knew it. Each twist in their path felt intentional, as if the woods were alive, reshaping itself to trap them. Then, with a devastating crash, a mass of shadows burst forth from behind the trees, coiling around them, blocking any retreat. The figures closed in, their haunting faces a cacophony of silent screams. Join us, the words echoed like thunder, reverberating deep inside Marcus' chest. As the shadows inched closer, Marcus' resolve began to falter. He had fought so hard to protect his family, but now, the weight of despair threatened to crush him. He could feel the darkness crawling nearer, the icy touch of its dread in the air, but then he saw it again, the flicker of light, barely visible. It pulsed like a heartbeat, flickering with urgency. Over there! Mark yelled, his heart racing. We can make it! Go! They dashed towards the light, limbs moving instinctively. The shadows cried out, their voices growing frantic and desperate. Just as they reached the glow, a solid figure lunged forward, knocking Mark sideways. Help me! The voice was chillingly familiar, echoing his own thoughts and fears. Mark glanced up, and the shadow before him twisted into something grotesque. It mirrored Leo, only older and more terrified. Dad! I need you, Leo, don't! Mark shouted, grabbing his son and spinning them both away from the advancing doom. The light felt inches away but seemed impossibly far. With pulse racing, Mark wrestled with time collapsing in on itself. They rushed towards the brightness, but the shadows lunged, reaching out with hands that clawed at their unity. Then the world erupted in silence as they stepped into the light, and everything vanished. But was it really safety? Mark shielded his eyes, gasping for breath, but the weight of dread remained heavy. Are we out? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. Before Mark could respond, the light dimmed, flickering like an old light bulb about to fail. What's happening? Leo's eyes widened in horror, glancing back at the engulfing darkness that seemed to wait just beyond their new sanctuary. As the glow sputtered and faltered, Mark felt a deep trembling in his gut. What they just escaped might not be the end. He didn't know what waited for them in the dark, the next challenge, the next trap, but he felt an electric crackle in the air, like a storm brewing. Get ready, he warned, feeling the edges of the darkness beckon, whispering promises that rattled every bone in his body. Something was coming, and it wasn't finished with them yet. In the fragile embrace of the dim light, the frantic heartbeats of Sarah, Mark, and Leo surged as dread filled the air again. Mark's pulse raced violently, sensing impending danger. The shadows waited, crawling just outside their flickering sanctuary. Is it all right? Sarah's voice trembled, clutching Leo tightly as tears jeopardized her courage. What if this is just another trap? Before Mark could soothe her fears, the dim light flickered, revealing a chilling sight: a twisted, grinning figure lurking at the edge of their retreat. Long fingers stretched towards them, beckoning in familiar temptation, the whispers growing louder. Join us, come play. Panic washed over them, crashing down like a tidal wave. We can't listen to that. Mark shouted, rallying against despair. It's just a trick. Remember the children we saw? He pulled Sarah and Leo closer, as if by sheer force of will he could shield them from the encroaching shadows. The light sputtered, and the voices crescendoed into a painful din, battling against his sanity. Help us, join us, they clawed at Mark's mind, unearthing buried memories of loss and desperation, stories of sacrifice and hopelessness that settled deep within his bones. Awareness sparked in him. This isn't real. He bellowed, trying to cut through the chaos surrounding them. It's a manipulation. But with every word, the haze of shadows grew thicker, swirling with intent to break through their tenuous grip on reality. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted, pulling at their feet like quicksand. The fire pit they had just escaped from flickered ominously again, drawing them in with a hypnotic call. Stay together, Mark urged, his voice steady despite the tremors in his gut. Please, Sarah begged. What if it needs one of us? What if it's a game? Leo's eyes mirrored her fear, wide and desperate. We won't let it take anyone, Mark promised fiercely, his heart guiding him forward. They needed a plan, needed to escape, but past experiences told him the shadows would chase long after they fled. The light flickered one last time before dimming entirely, plunging them into a suffocating slate of darkness. Mark's instincts kicked in. We need to move. This way. He stretched an arm toward a vague suggestion of a path at their side, flowing with yearning for safety. Where? Sarah cried, terror mingling with resignation. To what end? Anywhere but here. He shouted, channeling hope against despair, worry piercing through with urgency. They rushed forward, and as they did, the whispers morphed into frantic screams, echoing both dread and despair, a warning that turned into an overwhelming rush. Suddenly, the ground heaved beneath them as the darkness surged, alive and sentient. Its grasp felt cold, like the icy fingers of death closing around their throats. Run! Get out! Mark screamed, lunging ahead. Sarah and Leo followed, adrenaline propelling them through the choking shadows. They crashed through the underbrush, limbs scraped and torn as the cacophony roared louder. The darkness threatened to swallow their light. But into the fray, they burst into an open space once more, illuminated by moonlight streaming through a broken canopy. Breathless and trembling, they stopped. Before them lay an ancient tree, gnarled and sprawling, roots twisting into the earth like aged fingers intent on hiding long-forgotten secrets. Maybe it has a way out, Leo suggested, his voice wavering but hopeful. Mark nodded, his breath uneven. It has to offer something, anything. They approached the tree, fingers brushing the cool bark. Whispers nagged at them, tearing through the tense silence with the promise of forgotten stories, lost children, broken families all searching for a way home. Just hold on. Mark reached out, feeling the pulse of something ancient reverberate within the tree's core. We need to think. Suddenly, he turned, determination filling his gaze. If we unite our memories, we can break the shadows. Sarah nodded fervently, recalling the precious moments of joy with Leo. Remember laughter, remember love, she spoke softly, her voice weaving together strands of recollection, poised against the wonky maze of darkness. Leo hesitated but then smiled, the small sparkle of innocence igniting the air around them. Mommy, I remember when we went to the park, and I swung so high. The shadows recoiled momentarily, as if battling an unseen force. Encouraged, Mark embraced them both, forming their memories into a bright tapestry that clashed fiercely against the malevolence. Protect each other. Together! Mark shouted. With each shared thought, light bled between them, pushing back against the shadows that whispered in anguish. As the power of their unity grew, the shadows screamed in a cacophony, dissipating with harsh whispers, cupping their intangible hands as if grasping for retrieval. Join us! They shrieked, the final throes of despair echoing futilely against their strength. Light exploded around them, overwhelming and warm. Mark held Sarah and Leo tight, watching as the dark howls faded into nothingness. The glimmering connections of hope around them grew brighter, illuminating the path ahead, a path toward home. Look! Leo cried as the shimmer slowly revealed a clearing that expanded into the distance, releasing them from the choke of shadows. Is that? Yes. Mark confirmed, heart swelling with longing as they stepped closer, the glimmer pulling them forward. The suburbs hovered on the horizon, a kaleidoscope of light, laughter, and life. Hand in hand they rushed toward that warmth, toward safety. Behind them, they could feel the promise of untold horrors dissipating into the depths of the darkness, now just a memory overshadowed by the love they nurtured. As they finally reached the edge of their world once more, Mark turned, breathing a sigh of relief. It's over, he whispered, hope flooding his heart. But the woods remained, whispering gently, always waiting, forever hungry for souls lost in the night. As they stepped into Maplewood, they promised to protect each other, to stand together against the whispers of fear and shadow. And as night descended, Sarah held Leo close, knowing that the fight might never truly end, but they were ready together. Don't let this story fade away. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more people who need to hear these tales. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion, and for heaven's sake, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.